Now, do you have difficulties to get yourself to do important tasks? Or do you have trouble to stay disciplined and stick to new habits? Now, that said, what if I were to tell you that there is a method that allows you to change how you feel, to turn yourself from bored to motivated, or from giving up to pushing harder, for example? Now, and what I'm talking about is not some nonsense voodoo practice. What I'm talking about is conditioning. And as per its psychological definition, conditioning is the process of training a person or an animal to behave in a certain way. So in this video, I will show you how you can condition yourself to do whatever you want at any time, no matter how you feel. Doesn't that sound amazing? Now, overall, I broke up the video into 3 main sections. So in the first part, I will cover the psychological background. This includes what types of conditioning there are and how they work, of course. And as a little bonus for you, I will also show you how we neuroscientists condition animals to show fear on command, because that is a way to study fear memory formation and fear behavior. So the point is that this will make it clear that conditioning is a real phenomenon. And of course, I will show you how conditioning works, because every one of us, including you, has been conditioned to behave in a certain way already. That has been done over your past life, in fact. Second, I will introduce you to what triggers are. Now, I will explain them to you by giving you examples from celebrities who use triggers to become more productive. And I will also give you 3 key reasons as to why you should use these triggers in your life. Because, again, the truth is, having triggers is a huge advantage for your overall long-term success. And lastly, in the third part of the video, once you know the science behind it and how it all works, I will teach you step by step how you can use a simple trigger to condition yourself for distraction-free working with extreme focus, so that you have an easier time to stay disciplined and get those important tasks done like a champion. Anyhow, as always, I would appreciate if you could just take a moment to give the video a like and click the red subscribe button down there really quick, because that will allow us to make the channel grow and of course build a community of high performance and neuroscience enthusiasts together. That's it. Let's dive into the video. So welcome, high performers, and welcome to those of you who aim to become the very best by using the power of neuroscience and psychology. Now, my name is Nicholas. I'm a neuroscientist, a dementia researcher, and a high performance coach who specializes on the neuroscience of flow or zone. Anyhow, that said, let's get back to the topic of today's video, which is of course conditioning and triggers. Alright, so first and foremost, let's have a look at the psychology of conditioning. Now, generally, although somewhat debated who actually was the first, John B. Watson is considered the father of behaviorism, with his first publication in 1924, and he was a strict guy. He was a strict behaviorist, and to quote him, "Give me a dozen healthy infants, well-formed, and my own specified world to bring them up in, and I'll guarantee to take anyone at random and train him to become any type of specialist I might select. Doctor, lawyer, artist, merchant chief, and yes, even beggar man and thief, regardless of his talents, penchants, tendencies, abilities, vocations, and race of his ancestors." Now, in other words, what that means is that Watson believed that anyone, irrelevant of the genetic background, can be trained to behave in a certain way or to do a certain job if they are conditioned accordingly. And that's it. What you need to know is that there are 2 different types of conditioning in psychology. Now, the first one is known as the classic Pavlovian conditioning, which in other words is associative learning. So in this case, you learn to associate one thing with another thing. More about that in a second. And the second form of conditioning is also known as operant conditioning. Now, this is a form of learning due to being rewarded or punished for it. So you do a behavior more often if you're rewarded for it, or you do a behavior less often if you're punished for it. So to give you a bit, or to make this a bit easy to understand, let's have a look at the next slide and a few more feasible examples. So on the left-hand side, that's an example of classical Pavlovian conditioning. So the dog and the pet owner. In this case, the pet owner plays with his dog, just gives it a ball, and every time he plays with his dog, with the ball, he also gives the dog a bone to gnaw on. So what happens over time is that the dog learns the association that playing with a ball gives a delicious bone as well. And again, once this behavior, playing with a good ball, gives a delicious bone, is learned by the dog basically, the pet owner can just show the ball and the dog will automatically start to salivate because the dog is expecting, again, to get the delicious bone. So just fool the dog there. Anyhow, what this means is that the ball now becomes a trigger for the dog to expect food and to salivate. And by the way, Ivan Pavlov himself, again, that's the man classical Pavlovian conditioning was named after, did his initial conditioning experiments with dogs. So what he did is that he gave them food and he rang a bell each time they were fed. And at some point he just rang the bell and the dogs would start salivating all over because, again, the dogs learned that hearing the bell means that they get food. That is conditioning in its easiest and simplest form. On the other hand, on the right-hand side, another form of conditioning is something that we have all gone through in our past and especially in our childhood, and that's operant conditioning. And in this case, you learn to keep doing behaviors that you are rewarded for, and you learn that you should avoid behavior that you are punished for. Now, once again, an example of the little boy down there. He is scolded for his mother for having a messy room, of course, and on the other hand, he's rewarded with a badge and with ice cream for tidying up his room. So what the boy learns over time is that, yeah, I should keep my room tidy because I will be rewarded for that, and I should not keep my room messy because I will be punished by mom if I do that. Damn, I wish my mom would have given me ice cream whenever I would tidy up. I would probably just cheat and make a mess just to tidy up. Anyhow, this form of conditioning, just to give you some side information, was first described by the American psychologist Burrhus Skinner. Now, I also want to give you a quick insight into what we neuroscientists actually do in the lab. Because to investigate fear memory formation, fear behavior, and how you can forget fear memories to overcome traumas, for example, Pavlovian conditioning is often used with mice, in fact. So as you can see on the left, during fear conditioning, mice normally receive a mild foot shock. The foot shock is the so-called unconditioned stimulus, and at the same time, a certain tone is played, so a sound. And this sound or tone is called the conditioned stimulus, or in other words, that's the trigger. And over time, what happens is that the animal learns that whenever it hears this weird sound, they get a foot shock. And because, again, the animal knows that they will get a foot shock whenever they hear this sound or tone, they become anxious and they freeze. And at some point, it's again just enough to play the tone, and as soon as the animal hear it, they just freeze in fear because, again, they know what's coming. So it's like hearing the police siren, and You get anxious because it comes to you that you probably shouldn't have brought home your best friend's wife last night. So yeah, not good. Don't do that, by the way. But jokes aside, if you want to know how fear memories are formed in the brain and how to get rid of fear memories that you have formed in the brain, just let me know in the comments because I'm actually writing a scientific publication in the field of fear memory formation and fear behavior right now. So I can give you more insight into the fear networks in the brain, as well as, of course, the neurochemical serotonin, which is, of course, an antidepressive neurochemical. Anyhow, let's move on to the interesting part of the video, and that is how you can abuse conditioning to make yourself do whatever you want. And to define it, a trigger is a specific action, a thought, an object, a mantra, or a ritual. It could be anything that when you do it, puts you into an empowering state, so it makes you feel better, or it triggers a certain behavior that you have selected yourself. And just remember the images from earlier. You can make a dog salivate by giving it a ball every time you give it a bone, and the ball again ultimately becomes the trigger for the dog to salivate and get hungry. Alternatively, you can make mice freeze in fear by giving them a food shock and simultaneously playing a certain sound over and over again. So in this case, the sound was the trigger for the mouse to feel fear. And you can exactly do the same in your daily lives to make yourself do whatever you want. Now, first and foremost, before we get into specifics, why should you even use triggers? And there are three big reasons for that. The first one is that our behavior is up to 80% automatic, and triggers allow you to abuse this fact. Now, because our behavior is 80% automatic, habits in general predict our long-term success. And triggers allow you to automatically behave in the way you want, on command. For example, you can trigger yourself to work with deep focus, on command, snipping with your finger. And of course, if you can do that, then it's a gigantic advantage for you. Now, second, triggers give you freedom. They alleviate fear, and they also guarantee your long-term success, in fact. Because if you have the thought in your mind that says, no problem, I just use my trigger to get myself into working mode, then of course you don't need to worry anymore. You can also use a trigger to stick with your ambitions in the long term. So if you feel like quitting, just use your trigger as a tool, and it allows you to stay on track. The result is that you will stick with your ambitions, habits, etc., while everyone else, of course, who doesn't have a trigger, will probably just quit at some point, or they will be less productive on bad days, things like that. And third, go over this point as well, triggers make you independent of how you feel. And that's especially true for motivation. I actually made a separate video about the link between high performance, grit, and beliefs. And in this video, I also mentioned that motivation is useless. Again, for more specifics, check out the video. But the point is that I bet that many of you, including myself, had a time when we just didn't feel like working. And if we try to force ourselves into getting motivated by watching motivational speeches, I don't know, Arnold Schwarzenegger or whatever, for hours, or we just down several cans of energy drinks, whatever, the net effect is that we just waste the day by seeking for motivation, and we don't get anything accomplished. And again, triggers and conditioning, they are a way to get yourself to work even if you lack motivation and if you don't feel like it. And again, this is a skill that will separate you from anyone else who is trying to get into work by seeking motivation, which doesn't work, by the way. All right, now, what are triggers? Let me give you a few examples. So personally, I like to use coffee as a trigger. Every morning, I of course prepare my desk. I open my laptop, I open my Word documents, I get a bottle of water ready for academic writing for my publications, and just immediately before I start working, I brew myself a nice and warm cup of coffee. So I just enjoy my little cup of coffee, and after drinking it, I immediately start to work. No emails, no phone. I don't distract myself. I don't tidy up or do whatever else could possibly be done. So I drink coffee and I work. Coffee is my trigger. That means that I go for at least 3 hours of uninterrupted work in flow before I make any breaks. That's what I would recommend you to do anyhow. And I do nothing else. I just work. I drink my coffee, I work. And what did this over time is that coffee became my work trigger. So I basically conditioned myself to work after drinking my coffee. So even if I feel grumpy and like slapping someone, basically, I just get my cup of coffee and I start working. Another example would be the Jamaican sprinter Usain Bolt. Uh, I hope I spelled his name correctly, Usain Bolt. I flip in the picture so you know who I mean. So he's actually considered the best sprinter of all time. And Usain, he would wear a worn out, uh, he would just wear an old leather belt with some extra weights attached to it every time he would do his practice. It wasn't fancy, it was just an old piece of leather. And in his case, again, this specific belt was his trigger. So he wore this belt from the time he started running, and he would wear it every single time he practiced. So basically what this did is that this specific leather belt, it became his trigger to stay motivated for running, to stay humble, and to push himself to go harder and harder every time he wears the belt and every time he would do his practice. Belt on go, in other words. Another thing you could do is also rephrase a mantra every morning before you get into your work. For example, to remind yourself of what's important to you and how you want to behave today. This could mean something you write on a post-it, for example, such as I speed up when it gets hard. Or it could be I love the challenge and I push myself every day. Or it could be the favorite quote of the celebrity you follow, whatever. The thing is that the mantra becomes your trigger. And what you could do in addition is then, of course, set a self-improvement challenge for you to beat this day while you recite your mantra, for example. What you could also do if you're religious, you could place a cross on your desk and you could pray. And you could do that every time before you start work. And that would mean that the cross, again, would be your trigger and it would remind you of your greater purpose in life and the fact that you do your work to serve others with excellence and to serve God, of course. So the point is, as you can see, triggers are personal and you can pick whatever you want to make yourself to do whatever you want, basically. But it's very, very important, so pay close attention now. And you select a trigger. For example, if you want to condition yourself to work by drinking a coffee, like I do, then you must only and exclusively use the trigger in combination with the behavior you want to learn. Let me repeat that. If you want to get used to a trigger, if you want to condition yourself, then you must only use this trigger in combination with the behavior that you want to learn. So let's say if you want to condition yourself, again, working with coffee and work, then you only drink coffee immediately before you start working. Writing, for example. Don't drink coffee at other times of the day. So when you meet with friends, no coffee allowed. And also, don't drink coffee and do something else. That's not work. So don't drink coffee and answer emails. Or don't drink coffee and tidy up the house, for example, because that would ruin the conditioning effect. The point is you only drink coffee when you work, and that's how you learn to associate coffee with work. Makes sense? So the key takeaway from conditioning is that you should only use a trigger, which can be a mantra, an action, a ritual, an object, whatever it is. So only use a trigger in combination with the behavior that you want to learn. All right, that's it. Now to something that will be very valuable for you, I promise you. And that is how you can condition yourself to work deeply focused. Now, what I want you to do in this specific case is to use binaural beats as a trigger for work. And the reason I selected binaural beats in particular is because they are a form of music that can shift brainwave activity and it releases serotonin. The advantage of serotonin is that it has a relaxing effect on you. And in turn, of course, when you're relaxed, then it's easier for you to stay focused. And it's also easier for you to get into deep focus or flow. So once again, as a trigger, binaural beats are ideal. And I will also link you some binaural beats in the description so you can check it out after this video. Anyhow, let's look at your little exercise for today. So what you should do is as follows. First and foremost, block 90 to 180 minutes of undisturbed time in your calendar. And this time block, it will be reserved for deep focus and flow, so for productive work only. Second, what you will do now is set a clear goal, and you will decide exactly what you want to accomplish in these 90 to 180 minutes of undisturbed focus. And you will do this step by step and in detail. So important is that you note down your goals in your calendar and exactly what you do, and that you are as precise as humanly possible, once again. And for example, this could mean that you write a 500-word long paragraph to, let's say, describe power foods that improve brain health, for example. Again, just be very specific and point out exactly what you want to do, step by step, in those 90 to 180 minutes. And third, that is now the part where conditioning comes in. You switch on the binaural beats. Again, I link you the binaural beats in the description. And the thing is, very important, you only listen to these binaural beats when you work in those 90 to 180 minute time blocks with deep focus. And during those time blocks, you have no distractions, no interruptions, no task hopping, no emails, no social media, no sudden realization that you need to clean up the house or whatever, or go shopping. So instead of hitting the bathroom, just get a bottle, whatever. I don't care. The point is that only you, listening to the binaural beats and working on your self-set clear goals with deep focus is allowed in these 90 to 180 minutes, non-negotiably, and nothing else. Only you, the binaural beats, and deep working exist. And the point is that as you do this over and over again, listening to the binaural beats will become your personal trigger. So that means that as soon as you listen to the beats, you will automatically get into this work mode, into this deeply focused mode. And again, focus and work will just happen automatically. So, and that concludes the video. So thank you for watching, and if you found the video helpful, please like and subscribe to stay in the loop for future content, of course. And don't forget to implement the conditioning exercise that I shared with you earlier. Alright? Also, from the perspective of a high performance coach, using binaural beats and using conditioning to your advantage is something that will differentiate you from anyone else who doesn't do that. The thing is that knowledge is only potential power, but it's entirely useless if you don't make use of it. So implement it, be smarter, and draw out your full potential, high performance. In addition to that, after trying, or potentially you might even do something similar, just let me know in the comments how conditioning with the binaural beats works for you. Were you successful? Could you get yourself into working mode by listening to it? And of course, just feel free to share your experiences and success stories with all of us, because that's the point. We can inspire each other. Anyhow, that's it from me. Don't forget to crush it, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. See ya.